Folks, I got a question for you. Is radio dead? I don't think it is. I don't think it is. In fact, we have here a very fantastic young man, Bill Montgomery. Bill is the CEO of 104.9 The River. Bill, you're a Cedarville adjunct prof. You're a husband. You're a father. What else are you?
Hopefully, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ. That's pretty important. But I think you've nailed the high points.
The big ones? Yeah.
A husband of this year 30 years. So
wow, congrats, man. Congrats. Well, listen, I remember meeting you at a Christmas party a few years ago, and it's funny because we both had the same experience. I heard from like 6 people or 60 people. You got to meet Bill Montgomery, and you had heard, I think, the same thing about me.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we had heard about each other, and we live in the same city, but then we both show up at this Christmas party. And Bill, I don't know if you remember this, but that was the Christmas party that changed my life, and literally, and I'll tell you why. Because whatever, God was moving that night. Somebody grabbed me and said, "You're sitting at this table," and somebody grabbed you and said, "You're sitting at that table." And then at that table, Travis Smith was there, and Travis started asking questions, and I started saying about entrepreneurship, and he said, "We need a Cedarville entrepreneurship person." And he took it serious. I thought he was joking, but the next day I get an email from Dr. Heyman, and the rest is history. And but you teach at Cedarville. In fact, I want to show a quick article. How cool is it, and why are you at Cedarville teaching? And what do you teach there?
Yes, I'm in the, it's kind of in the communications department under the broadcasting. They call it the BRDM, Broadcast and Digital Media major.
Yeah.
And from my background, so I teach a class, Broadcast and Digital Media Sales and Broadcast and Digital Media Management.
That's cool. Okay, fantastic. I'm seeing it. And you graduated from Cedarville.
I did many years ago.
1993.
And it's interesting that the classes that I teach had a profound influence on the direction that my career took. When I went into radio at the beginning, I thought, I want to be on the air. And we all realize there's very few people that are, on the air celebrities, and realize those really weren't my gifts. But God moved me into sales. And that has been my career. The people that helped guest teach in those classes really ignited my passion, gave me my first job. And so it was fantastic.
What fills your tank about teaching young people? Because I mean, you don't need the job at Cedarville adjunct. I mean, nothing against college adjunct professors, but it's not for the pay, for the time.
That's a fair statement.
Is that statement? I mean, especially if you're driving and commuting, but like, obviously you have to believe in it. Second of all, like, what does it fulfill for you?
I think the giving back and the mentoring that profoundly impacted my life when I was a student,
Interesting.
and people that just built into me and gave me time, gave me knowledge, gave me resources, gave me next steps, gave me advice, and to be able to turn around and do that for students, especially those that are curious, those that are willing, those that are interested. And it's almost like any request I get from a student, if I can fulfill it, I do it.
Wow.
Because you see they're hungry. And then I've been doing this for about a decade. And the great part is I've got people that work in my company that were in my class, several of them, and I'll go to industry events and I'll see them all around the room.
Wow.
Those ones that I've had in my class are ones that are in the program. And it's so exciting. It's so encouraging to see them taking steps and growing from the information they've gotten from me and others. So that right there just is enough to go. I got to keep going back. I hope you feel this teaching college students. It keeps you young. You're a little more connected to youth and what's going on, and I love that.
Listen, I absolutely love it. To me, I think you know the story, but I had applied 18 years ago. I think it's more now because 2 years just went by. But in 2005. I applied and they rejected me as a Bible prof. And, God moved other places and ways, and I became an entrepreneur. But I will tell you what, I guess it was always there in my mind. and I love it. It's fantastic. I go in several times a week. But yeah, these students fire me up. Of course, now my kids are going to be at that college age. Our oldest is senior in high school, so he's going to go to Cedarville next year. But Bill, let's talk about sales, because Christian and sales, some people might think, ooh, sales is yucky. I actually see sales as serving. I don't know what your definition is, but how did you become so successful at sales?
Um, I think it started probably with a mindset that you're talking about, that sales is service,
Mm.
um, and really conveying that message to people. I love to tell people, people talk, oh, that guy's such an amazing salesman. He can sell ice cubes to Eskimos. And I've
Mhm.
always thought, if Eskimos don't need ice cube, you're just a charlatan.
Yeah, that's
you're not a
true.
good salesman. But if they need ice cubes, you're doing your job and you're providing a
That's
really
good.
valuable service. And so I really work with the definition in my classes, and even in my life, of sales is just a transference of confidence. And so if
Oh,
I
that's good.
believe in something passionately and know that it can work, what I want to do is just pass that confidence on to the person that's buying from me and go, yes, this is going to work for you. This is going to be something that you need. This is going to positively benefit your life. Because if I'm doing my job well, me selling them is just going to have them sell me to more people.
You're blowing my mind. I'll tell you. Listen. I've never heard of it quite like that. I've heard similar, but not quite like that. Sales is a transference of confidence. Is that what you said?
Absolutely. Yes.
That is hot. That is good. I like that. I tell my people a little bit differently, but I say, people buy belief.
Mm,
You know, and I get that from somebody else, but
I love
it's
that.
but it's true. Like, if you don't believe in it, that's where the integrity gap is. And I feel that um there's this scene, you might remember this. You remember Joaquin Phoenix Walk the Line?
Yes.
Okay, there's this scene where he is in front of a guy named Sam Phillips auditioning, and he's playing a song that everybody's heard on the radio. It's a Jimmy Davis song, and he doesn't really believe it. And Sam Davis calls him out, or Sam Phillips, and he says, I don't believe you. And he's like, what do you mean? You telling me I don't believe in God? Because the song was about God. And he says, no. Are you telling me if you were lying in a ditch and you had one song to sing, would you sing that same Jimmy Davis song we've heard on the radio, or would you sing something real? Because that's the song that truly saves people. And it's like, boom, Johnny Cash is like, he's like called out. And then he digs deep and he says, I got another song. You got anything about against the Air Force? And he says no, and he says I do, and then he sings a really intense song, and then he gets signed right there on the spot. So why do you think, Bill? I mean, you are in this industry. That's kind of why I told the story. But you see musicians that come in that are probably more believable than others.
Yeah. It's funny. One of the segments, being in Christian music radio, that we air is kind of the story behind the song, because a lot of times you may hear a song and you like it and it's good, and then you hear an artist, whether live in person, whether on the radio, whether through a YouTube clip, and they talk about the power behind that song, or why they wrote that song, or why they picked that song, and it adds such new meaning to it, and
Ah,
so much more powerful because of exactly what you said. I mean, they are now selling the song in a way that it shows the deep belief that they have.
interesting, interesting. So what do you tell the person who says, radio is do people even listen to that? I mean, you're the one who sees life change and listenership and engagement, but tell a doubter out there.
It's interesting because we all typically come from our own experience, and if I don't listen to the radio a lot, I just assume nobody else does that. If I don't watch TV anymore, nobody else does. And so obviously you have to go to a little bit of research and find out what is out there and what's real and what's true. But there have been many studies recently. Nielsen, probably the biggest name and most famous. But from a radio standpoint, it is still listened to by over 90% of Americans in the average week.
Wow.
It's pretty staggering, the number, and across the world, still bigger than any other medium. Now, it's competing for more time with other things like podcasts that we're creating right now, and
Sure.
the streaming services. So yeah, those play a factor. So you've got to, it really makes the radio broadcaster have to be more on their game, that they've got to be interesting, they've got to be compelling, they've got to be fresh. And we try to do those things, because otherwise there are so many more options out there, as opposed to just the buttons that are in my car.
The podcast is called the E-Mind. It stands for entrepreneurship, but it really talks about how everyone in every industry needs to think like an entrepreneur. How have you had to think like an entrepreneur within your day-to-day in terms of both things, adjunct professor, president of, the river? How have you had to tap into those skills?
One of the things in my career, especially being in sales, I've worked with a ton of entrepreneurs, because they're the ones typically making advertising, buying decisions. And I have so much respect for them, because, the success and failure of their organization typically rises and falls on the decisions they make, the culture they create. And so I really feel like in the world that I'm in, both as an adjunct, I've got students from 7 to 9:30 at night, one night a week. I would not have been a good student in a class at night at all. And so I've got to keep things moving. I've got to make them compelling. I've got to make them interesting, to keep their attention. I've got to get them engaged.
Yeah,
and that's the same, that's the same way with the radio. We can't do things we did 30 years ago, 50 years ago. We've got to try new. We've got to try different. We've got to freshen things up. We've got to try to engage the audience. And part of that is trying to learn what is out there to do that. And part of it is hiring really good people that have the same passion, and let them own their slice of the business, and trust them to go out and do it well, and then inspect that and evaluate it. And hey, if that didn't work, we're going to tweak it. And I'm going to be working at night because we got to figure this thing out, and we got to get this thing fixed. And so you've got to have an entrepreneur's mindset of, I have to do everything that it takes to be successful in this, within reason.
Yeah.
Putting some guardrails on that, but we're going to be successful based on the people that we hire and the work that we do.
Wow. So give us an example of perhaps a innovative, creative, or risky thing that 104.9 The River has had to do in the last 3 years.
Probably something that we have done. There has been a lot of big companies in the radio world are getting out of radio. A lot of them because they're leveraged, and so they have to sell radio stations because they have a lot of debt, and they're just trying to restructure their debt, and they put themselves in kind of a negative position. But we know that there's still a lot of people out there, and our format is one of the few formats that's growing and doing well. So we stepped out a little over a year ago and bought more radio stations in another market, up in Worcester, Ohio. And
Wow.
we May 1st flip the switch on that. And that's been a big shift. And there's people that are sad to lose the country format that they've had, but we're excited to bring what we're doing to that community. But that's a big risk that we believe is going to pay off. We've kept most of the people at that station employed, and we're excited.
You're actually expanding.
Yes. So we are, that's a risk that we absolutely believe in, and we're doing everything we can, but we're doing expansion. So that's one idea.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Yeah, people that we run in circles with, a guy like Jim Stevenson and Tom Balliot over at ICC. They're the ones who kind of, hosted the Christmas party. But I heard recently, and I do have a point. My brain does go like a squirrel, but I do have a point. But your child married Jim's child, correct?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. So how is that to have like entrepreneur, explosion when you and Jim get together? Do you have like entrepreneur conversations, or what? You talk about cars? What do you talk about?
Yeah, we do. And that's one of the great things is when I've got an idea, when I've got something crazy or a challenge, that's another entrepreneurial mind that I can go pick, because I think so many of us are better when we have other people's
Yeah, to bounce stuff
brain
off.
that we can bounce ideas off of and go, no, don't go down that road. That's not going to work. Or, hey, if you take it this and shift it this way and then try it, it's actually going to go even better.
Wow.
And so that has really helped. And what's funny is I think me and Jim, like with my son, I see some of that entrepreneurial stuff rubbing off on him, and
Yeah.
getting into business and putting his Ohio State degree to work, seeing that rub off. So it's got multiple benefits for me.
Yesterday I was at Cedarville and I saw lots of students, but two different students came and visited me. One student came in and said they were an entrepreneur. And I've been able to watch this student, and the student's fantastic. But honestly, this student isn't an entrepreneur. Like, I'm just being real, and I was able to tell this person that's okay. Like, you don't have to be an entrepreneur. But I said, you still, I think, need to think like an entrepreneur. You're starting to see even Jim or Bill, we're just talking about Jim, but you're even starting to see intrapreneurs who it's a new term, but it's people who think like an entrepreneur, but they're not risking their own resources. They work in a company where the company is basically saying, hey, we're going to allow you to, experiment in this area and with this project. Have you been doing that with any of your DJs or any of your people, where you kind of like give them a little bit of boundaries, a little bit of guidance, a little bit of budget, but they're really not told this is exactly how you're going to achieve this objective, and they are kind of left to experiment?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind, we've got some folks on staff that have launched a podcast, and some of the podcasts we do are more passion projects for people that aren't specifically tied to our brand. This one, if you're a fan of college football and you like Ohio State, or you like that team up north as we call them, but if you like
Sure.
that, it is the Rivalry Podcast. And so essentially what we did with these folks is we said, hey, grow this podcast, figure out how to do it. And as we get sponsorship, you're going to have the dollars to put back into the podcast to grow it.
Wow.
How do you do that? And so they've gone, hey, we're going to create a Patreon. Hey, we're going to get some t-shirts and use those as giveaways. We're going to use some of this money to travel to games. And what we've seen, and it's been a multi-year labor of love. And it's funny that kind of in this, I think this is either the third or fourth year where you see it really begin to, that hockey stick moment where it really begins to take off because of many of these things that they've done. And suddenly, the views grow exponentially because the investment and the time that they've put back in, and the resources, where instead of just saying, hey, we're going to put those as, go to the bottom line of the company, we're going to reinvest those out into your product.
That's cool. Oh, I like that. That's great. So what we've even collaborated around some books, and let's maybe talk to authors for a second, because we do have authors that watch this. What would you tell an author? Because I love chatting with you and your team. We did talk about this. Some authors kind of come into the wrong mindset, where they think that a radio interview is all about them and their book. And I coach people, I coach authors for media. But that was a big shift. Like 20 years ago, when I first got my first TV gig or speaking gig or radio, I kind of thought, they're here to talk about my book and me. And then I'm telling you, it was probably 2 episodes where like God just hit me upside the head and it's like, no, actually, the main dish is the host. The main dish is the station. The main dish is the listener. You're actually, they're your clients, and your goal is to serve them. What's the difference when you hear an author like that who takes that mindset versus the one who becomes very self-absorbed? What tips can you give us?
I would absolutely agree with that. I think when the author is able to communicate not so much about, let me tell you all of the points of my book or all of the reasons why I came up with this. And I think to a degree, some of those are interesting and some of those are important. But when you digest this material, when you get involved in this, here's how it's going to serve you. And here's why you want to be engaged with it. And I'm going to give you a little bit of nugget about this. And I'm going to tell you how it transformed this person. And if they can do that, people are leaning in and they're seeing themselves in that picture of how this book, and it's like, man, I got to get that book, and I'm going to share that book because I want to do that. Whereas if we just do a deep dive down the rabbit hole of your book, it's only going to hit the people that maybe resonate initially with that story. Whereas if you can turn that and go, here's how everybody can gain something. I think it just opens the doors and the opportunity much wider.
Let's hit them with some quick tips. In other words, tell me this. Give me a thumbs up or a thumbs down. The interviewer on the radio asks you a question about your book, and you say, "Well, why don't you tell us? You should have read the book." Is that good?
That's probably not going to get you a lot more interviews. For sure. I know you work and coach your authors with, hey, let me give the interviewer all the information that they need, so that they don't have to read it, because the reality is people are busy. And if you're an author podcast, now, hey, if you can read stuff, do yourself a favor. But the reality of it is a lot of people are trying to fill interview time, even if they've got, and they're busy. And they're just skimming things. Man, take the work from them, and talk to them as if they've read it, but without having to have the knowledge of all the stuff that's there. And I'll tell you what, they will rave about you.
Listen, I've been asked back to many shows because my number one goal is make the host the hero, boost them up, make them feel amazing. And it's not false, but it's little things, and Bill, if you're interviewing me, I say, Bill, that's a great question. And have you ever had this experience where blah, 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 but it's really that type of approach. And then how do you make the listener the hero as well when you're being, an author who's being interviewed on the radio? How do you appeal to the listener?
I think there's a couple ways that you can do that. One of them, I think when people are doing a broad interview, as I'm thinking about this, this interview, I'm just answering questions from my friend Kary, and whether or not we were friends, I'm talking to this guy Kary that I've met and doing that. And when we think of, oh man, I'm talking to the universe of people out there that might ever see this, I'm not going to connect. It's going to be really hard. But if I can think of, I'm just talking to this interviewer, or I'm talking to that one person that loves this book and is excited for it. Everybody that hears and receives that is going to become that one person that's interested and excited. And think about those people you have one-on-one interactions with, and talk to them, because you'll find those connecting points of everybody that's going to find your message interesting.
That's really good advice. Yeah, I tell authors, talk to your former stuck self, because your former stuck self, them, you have empathy for them, what they are going through. But you're right, it sounds different than today. Everyone, we're here with Bill Montgomery, and exactly. It's not going to connect. I know we only have about 3 minutes left, but what would you like us to say? I know that you got 104.9 The River. I would encourage people, could they listen to it even if they don't live in the area?
You can actually. So if you want some uplifting and encouraging music in your life, I'm a big believer that if you change your thoughts, you can change your behavior, you can change your habits. We have a streaming, and you're seeing that on the web right now, that you can listen in whatever area you're in. We have a mobile app that if you go on your Apple or your Google Play Store and you look for 104.9, you're going to find our mobile app. And in fact, I just was talking with one of our listeners that is now sharing time between here and North Carolina. He says, we listen to The River all the time. We just do it in North Carolina. not here,
Wow.
which is a lot of fun. It's very good. So yeah, that's the great part of radio, and if you use some different streaming apps like TuneIn or iHeart or Odyssey app, all of those actually carry the river on those as well.
That is awesome. Well, Bill, this was great. I know you dropped some gold there for the authors that may be listening as well. And then, Bill, what's new? What's exciting you in the next 12 months? What are you looking forward to?
Probably, the growth of the radio station a little bit is certainly that, moving up into the Worcester area. We're in some other, once people know that you're interested in growth, and once God sees that you're open to that, more opportunities present themselves. So there's certainly some opportunities we're looking at of growth and mergers, and we'll see what happens with that. So I think that's exciting. And I tell you, and I know you deal with this kind of stuff, but the world of AI is very fascinating, and what that's going to mean for our, the radio world, both positively and negatively, and how that impacts people. But just trying to do some study and research and see how that impacts things is very interesting to me right now.
That's awesome. Well, I know the church I attend, Life Point in Lewis Center, and expanding all over the place, but Dean Folks has done, some advertisement on 104.9. And I just know a lot of, Gabe Taviano, who originally got me into podcasting long time ago. He commented. So we run in a lot of circles, our friend John Giganti,
yes.
But listen, Bill, you're doing great work. Thanks for pouring into the students as well. And thanks for being here today.
Kary, it's a pleasure. I enjoy your podcast a lot because I hear a lot of interesting people doing a lot of interesting things around the country that just open my mind to new ideas. And so if I brought some people in that as I've promoted this and you haven't seen some of Kary's stuff, check it out. It's fantastic.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Bill. You make it a great day. All right.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate your time.
See everybody. Take care.